In this part of the video, I'm going to talk to you about the financial pyramid of success. Big caveat here is, as it says on the tin, the pyramid is all about financial success. Everyone has different priorities, and I'm not here to judge anyone or tell anyone what they should do. I am here to try to explain how the world of contracting works, and this lens focuses on the financial side of things. I recognise that people value other things, and other things are very important, such as time off, and that's very, very important. But of course, if you value downtime more than profits, for example, it's probably unreasonable to expect to be a top performer financially. The financial pyramid of success basically says 80% of the outcome comes from 20% of the effort. Or in this example, 20% of individuals who contract are hoovering up 80% of the opportunity. Obviously, you want to be in the top 20%. But what does that actually mean? Let's have a look at the pyramid. So, at the top 1%, those are people who are smashing it. These are contractors who have absolutely maximised their profits and gone on to potentially build fully fledged businesses. So, for example, a niche consultancy, a bit like Project Partners, where they're now running a business and employing and mentoring others to deliver their specialism. The 4% are what we call prosperous. Year in, year out, they are able to maximise their annual profits. Note, I use profits, not day rate or income. These guys will typically have a great network and will very rarely, if ever, need to go looking for work. The work comes to them. They're recognised as leaders in their specialisms and can generally command a higher rate and choose the gigs that they want. Next, we've got the 15%. These people are making a good living. They're career contractors and only really without work when they choose. They're not quite at the level of the prosperous bunch, but year in, year out, they're at least 90% utilised when they want to be. This group will usually have a better work-life balance than the prosperous group. That's the good living group. Next is the 60%, which obviously is the vast majority, and these are people that are getting by. They have or are working as contractors, but are generally average. Probably considered solid members of the team who can do a job, recognised as a team player, etc. But when it comes down to it, they'll be the ones that will let go first if cost savings need to be made, for example. They may be hamstrung by their lack of flexibility, e.g. I want to work within 15 minutes of a certain location, or perceived value, e.g. don't darken my door with $475 per day out of a £500 contract or something like that. They don't think like contractors, they think like workers. I've mentioned IR35 before, and this is a key distinction. If you look like a worker and act like a worker, like an employee, that's how you'll be treated by your employer. It's an IR35 red flag. You need to think like a contractor. So they're easily tempted back into perm roles, and they're pretty much living month to month with very little in the way of savings or retained profits to cover any downtime. In our second video, Workshop 2, we'll talk more about how to pay yourself. The final 20% are broke. They haven't had a contract in ages and they're living off savings, a spouse or other income. Fundamentally, they're just not cut out to be contractors and would jump at any old opportunity just to cover the bills. Fundamental reason, their mindset is incorrect. They cannot and will not change their views. Not about their skill. Really important distinction, that, guys. Forget how good you are at your job. If your mindset is not right to be financially successful as a contractor, you will be limiting your opportunities. So, it doesn't matter where you are now. The simple fact you are here and are investing in yourself tells us that you're a serious kind of person and have a very high chance of getting into the top 20%. If you learn and implement everything in this video. Artificial constraints. So, our aim here is to get you to understand what giving yourself limitations will stop them achieving in your why that you captured earlier. By the end of this particular exercise, all delegates will understand that thinking outside the box about contracting will give them a leading edge against other candidates. Has anyone heard of thinking outside the box? It's a cliche, right? but how many of you actually unintentionally, without thought, restrict yourselves? So I want to ask these questions. I've asked these questions to myself as well, and this is a journey through my answers, and hope that some of these will resonate with yours. So the first thing to ask is why. Why it is important to think outside the box, because inside the box feels safe, right? We agree with everyone else, we have common goals and thoughts. To come outside of that box could risk your reputation, which we all work very hard to build up. Why risk it? Is it a luxury or a necessity? Think of us now. We're in a network, we're in the same network. We have the same knowledge about other people in our industry. We understand certain processes and methodologies that help us in our industry. We all possess or can gather the same information. And that's the scary thought. If we all possess the same information, what is the difference between ourselves? What's our USP, our unique selling proposition? Why should I purchase your services versus the next person's? The only thing is what we do with that common shared information. So to think creatively is not a luxury, it's a necessity. The other thing we need to understand is, which box are we actually talking about? We must have a clear definition, so we are really talking about something specific. The box is not our minds. We can think outside of our minds. It's the boundary within our minds. It's the boundary between what we know and what we haven't yet thought about. Our mind will have creative boundaries based upon what we've learned over time, our environments, what we're told, indirect experience, what other people have thought and experienced and created. All of that builds in the anthill in which we live. And we do very well in that. We feel safe. This is why it's very risky to think outside of that box. It's invisible to us. And so, if it's invisible and risky to us, it will be the same for most people. And therefore, to set yourself apart, you must start to think outside of boundaries. The things you have learned, the things that you've been taught. Let's apply this to contract. Let's say a recruitment agent calls you and says, I have a role, and it's based in Bristol or London, £500 a day. You can look at this in two ways. You can draw that boundary that you've been taught and say, but I'm not based in Bristol or London, I can't travel. Or you can read between the lines. The recruiter said Bristol or London. The client has multiple sites and they must obviously have the ability to communicate across both. They must do a lot of video and teleconferences, so it's not beyond a reasonable stretch that remote working might be a possibility in this organisation. Here's the kicker, the recruiter rarely knows. Next, let me tell you a true story. So a recruiter I know back in the day called Matt called me. I've got a project management role in property for LBG. It'll be perfect for you. What do I say? Great, thanks for thinking of me. Tell me more. What I don't say is, where is it? How much? None of that stuff. Tell me more. Let the recruiter know that you're interested. So, Matt's thinking, great, he's really interested. This is in the bag. So, turns out the role was advertised as being based in Bristol. Now, at that time I lived in Chester. Bristol is about 4 hours door to door from Chester, far from ideal. So, from a profit point of view, what am I thinking? I'd likely need to stay over. That would cost me, say, in a modest hotel about £80 per night. That reduces the rate from kind of £580 that was offered or suggested to around £500. And I know I could probably get better elsewhere. This is hassle. What do I say? I say, Matt, thanks very much. When can I go for an interview? Because I know Matt has not the foggiest, and I know from experience when the client says what they want isn't always what they want. So I go, it takes me 5 hours traffic, I get a speeding ticket, brilliant. In the interview, the client says to me, I have a team all over the place, are you okay remote working most of the time to save costs? Hell yeah! Imagine if when I first spoke to Matt, I turned it down because I put arbitrary barriers in the way. Now, it's great in hindsight, and it might not have turned out to be the case. It might have been that the role was based in Bristol, you needed to be there 5 days a week. Well, what's the worst that could have happened? It's good interview and application practice. You don't have to say no until you've actually been offered the contract. or even later than that. And what else are you doing? With the plus, you have to say yes to the recruiter so they think you're worthy of the call the next time around. So that's location. What about job title? Because you're here to maximise your company's profits, not get all pretentious and prissy about your job title. What is that anyway? Based on the day rate card with the client. So think, you consider yourself to be a program manager and the job on offer is senior project manager. You might think, I'm not doing that. It's often what is on the rate card. But when you read the detail or extend your boundaries, the day rate may work for you, it's longer term, the location is on the doorstep, it's a role you've never done before. So let me tell you another true story about one of the favourite contracts and organisations I've ever worked in, Lloyds Banking Group. I'd been there for about 5 or 6 months working on an integration project when Lloyds bought the HBOS Group. Big programme, lots and lots of contractors working on it. At the end of that programme, because of the state aid that Lloyds Banking Group had taken at that time to buy HBOS, they were forced by the European Union to carve out a separate bank, which ended up being TSB Bank, which was launched. That programme was called Verdi. Really interesting programme, though lots of you will have heard of it. For all the contractors that were on the integration programme, anybody who was going to be extended onto the Verdi programme would be retained by Lloyds Banking Group. Their mandate at the time, they were taking advantage of the kind of economic climate, was to offer everybody a 10% haircut in day rate. So let me just talk to you a little bit specifically about that. At that time, a long time ago now, I was a project manager, I was on £450 a day. So they were offering me a rate down to £405. But I knew the programme had legs. I knew I'd have been rejecting over £8 grand a month to, instead of £9 grand a month, so a reduction of about £1,000. So remember my equation from earlier. A day rate in hand is worth 2 in the bush. So it would take you a long time to kind of claw back that extra. You've got to think about the profitability of your limited company. As it turned out, it was the right decision. I was promoted and promoted and promoted, and eventually I ended up being the program director of Verdi Stream E, which was an absolutely fantastic program with a huge budget and a great team. But if I'd have declined that opportunity at that time, I'd have missed out. So it really is worth considering the long term, not to get prissy about that short term reduction if one's on the cards. So, in summary, understand your boundaries and where they've come from. Look to extend those beyond, because that's what sets you apart. And if only for the fact that nothing is ever as it seems. You lose out if you don't at least try. What's the worst that can happen? Keep an open mind and don't artificially constrain yourself. Okay, we've talked about your artificial constraints. Next, let's talk about other people's artificial constraints. Too many people, in my opinion, listen to others. Their partner, their family, their friends. Unless any of those people are experienced, top-performing contractors, really, what do they know? Let's talk about Maslow's hierarchy of needs. Here on screen, you can see Maslow's hierarchy of needs. Abraham Harold Maslow was a psychologist who studied positive human qualities and the lives of exemplary people. In 1954, Maslow created the hierarchy of human needs and expressed his theories in the book Motivation and Personality. This diagram is a summary of Maslow's hierarchy of needs. We're going to do another little exercise now, and what we're going to do is try and get you to understand by listening to others what failure exposure that you're leaving yourself open to. Our objective is, by the end of this little mini session, you'll be able to understand that just thinking outside their own box, listening to others, will not help them succeed. So, has anyone heard of Maslow's hierarchy already? Maybe you have. Maslow created the hierarchy of human needs, and it's based upon how humans intrinsically partake in behavioural motivation. His findings were that it's very rare for someone to strive for self-actualization, which is at the top of the pyramid just there, without having their needs first met in the other stages, like physiological, that's water, food, sleep, etc., at the bottom of the pyramid. So for example, a homeless man will not be motivated to buy art, but he will be motivated to secure his most basic needs such as food, water, etc. Equally, a new homeowner just making ends meet will not be motivated by getting their nails done every week. In between the bottom and the top of this pyramid, there are other needs. So in between physiological and self-actualization, there are other needs like safety, love and esteem. This means that in order for motivation to occur at the next level, each level must be satisfied with the individual themselves. Maslow later clarified that satisfaction of a need is not an all or none phenomenon, and that when a deficit need has been more or less satisfied, it will go away, and our activities become habitually directed towards meeting the next set of needs that we have yet to satisfy. The goal in Maslow's theory is to attain the fifth level, or the self-actualization stage, although it's only suggested that 2% of people will get to this place. Every person is capable of getting there and has the desire to move up the hierarchy towards the level of self-actualization. Unfortunately, progress up the pyramid is often disrupted by a failure to meet lower level needs. This might be life experiences, which would include divorce or loss of a job, may cause an individual to fluctuate between levels of the hierarchy. So, what's the point in telling you this theory? Well, the point is, apart from it being a very interesting psychological theory, it's that not everyone is the same. We are all at different levels and are motivated by different things. Let me give you a real world example, a true story of my own about when I first went contracting, which proves out this Maslow's hierarchy piece that I'm talking to. And if you think about it, you might find some similar examples in your own life. When I first decided to go contracting and leave the safety of my permanent job with Big Blue, IBM, one of the biggest companies in the world at the time, my mum, bless her, went absolutely berserk. I don't think she spoke to me for a couple of weeks when I quit my job at the safety of IBM to go contracting. So, obviously, Mum was really worried about me and wanted me to do well. She was at the safety level of Maslow's hierarchy, worrying about security of role, money and household. I was already way past there, up somewhere towards esteem or self-actualization. I was already climbing my way up the pyramid. So, how could we ever have been aligned, and why should we be? Everyone's at a different level, motivated by different things. Therefore, other people aren't able to tell you, me, anyone else, unless you are very confident they're in exactly the same place as you on the pyramid. Why should you listen to them? They've got different motivations, they're at different places in their lives. Try to remember that next time you solicit advice from people who are not top contractors